Hey everyone, welcome to another video of the React Masterclass series. In this video, we'll talk about React class-based components. So React lets you define the components as classes or functions. The class-based components have the following additional features over the functional components. So in order to tap into the lifecycle methods, we have to use the use effect hook in the functional components. But it comes inherently in the class-based components, and you have a final range control to a number of lifecycle methods. Also, in order to use the state in the functional component, we use state hook, right? But the state and the set state is available as an instance property in the class-based components, so you don't have to use any hook over there. Class-based components also support a default props, and you can set a display name which is available as a class property. Now, how to use the class-based component? So we have to create a class which extends React.component, and it's mandatory to implement a render method which returns JSX. So your component should look something like this. So here we have a class named car which extends React.component, and we have implemented a render method which returns JSX. So the render method is mandatory to implement. There are a lot of other methods, but those are optional. Now let's see some examples. So here I have the car component, which is having the render method, and we are returning a heading over here. And inside the app.js, I have added the star component, and I have passed the props as brand equal to BMW. Now, in order to use this props, I can directly write this dot props dot brand, and you can see that the brand is rendered over here. Now let's try to add a constructor method over here. So if we directly add the constructor, then you can see that it's giving an error that you should call super keyword. So that is true for all classes in JavaScript, that if you're extending something, then it's necessary to add the super keyword. Now let's try to access this dot props in the constructor. So if we try to do that, then you can see that it's giving undefined on line 6. It's because if you want to use this dot props within the constructor, then we have to first pass props as an argument to the constructor, and then we also need to pass it to the super keyword, so that this React.components constructor is called with this props, so that React.component initializes these props. And you can see that now this dot props is visible over here. We can also set up the state over here. So let's add a state named color as black. And we can use the same state using this dot. And we can use the state within our JSX, something like this dot state dot color. Now, if we try to set the state within the constructor, then React won't allow us to do that. So if we try to do this, then you can see that it's giving us a warning, can't call setState on the component that is not yet mounted. So that is why we should avoid calling setState within the constructor. Now let's try to add a button over here. So let me quickly add a button. I have added this button, click me. Now let's try to add an event handler. Inside the event handler, we console log this dot state and this dot props. Let me remove this console log, and let's bind the click handler on the on click event. Let's add the click handler on the on click event. Now, if we click on this button, then you can see that it's giving us an error that cannot read property of undefined. The reason behind this is because this keyword doesn't represent I. This is throwing an error is because this is undefined. Now let me add a button over here, and let's add a click handler. And inside the click handler, let me console log a few of the things. First is this keyword, and then this dot props and this dot state. So now if I click on this button, then you can see that it's throwing us an error. And if we try to simply console log this, then you can see that this is undefined, right? So now in order to fix this problem, there are two ways. There are two ways to fix this problem. The first one is I can bind the click handler over here to the correct value of this. So I can write this dot click handler and this dot click handler dot bind, and we can bind the correct value of this which is available inside the constructor. So inside the constructor, this points to the instance of the car, but inside the click handler, the issue is that when I'm clicking on this button, then this is undefined because this picks up the caller context. Now let's see if this fixes the problem. So if you click on this button, then you can see that now this is the car instance, and now we can access this dot props and this dot state over here by using bind. And the way is to fix this problem is by using the arrow functions. So I can, instead of using the normal function, I can write this as an arrow function. And now if I click on this button, then also I'm able to access this as an instance, as a car instance. And if we try to print this dot state and this dot props, then you can see that the state is color black and the props is brand BMW. So you have to always take. So whenever you are adding any event handler, then you have to take care of this keyword. Either you can do the binding within your constructor, or you can use the arrow functions. Both will solve the problem. Now let's talk about the setState method. So we use the setState method to change the state object, and the setState method is an asynchronous method. The setState calls are batched to provide better performance in React. So this is the syntax of the setState method, where there are two ways to call it. So one is we can directly pass the object over here, where the key will be the state name that we want to update, and the value is the updated value. The second way to call the setState method is by passing the callback over here. So in the callback argument, we get the previous state. So whenever you want to use the previous state to derive the latest state, then we can use the callback, and we have to return the updated state value over here, where again the key is state name and the value can be computed based upon the previous state. Now let's see some examples of the setState method. So I'm adding an additional state, which I'll name it as speed, and I'll mark the initial speed as 0. And let me add a div over here to show the speed. Speed. So the speed is currently 0. Now let me add two buttons over here. One of the button will be used to accelerate the speed, and the other button will be used to apply the brake. That will deaccelerate the speed. So we'll have to add two event handlers over here. One is accelerate and the other is brake. So let's define them. And I'll use arrow functions over here so that I don't face any issue using this keyword. So I've added these two methods, accelerate and break, and I have used arrow function over here so that I don't face any issue with this keyword usage. Now in the accelerate, we'll try to use the setState method, and we'll have to use a callback over here because we need to know the previous speed of the car. We can also choose to directly update the speed by just passing an object, but here we need the previous state. I can return, so I have to return an object over here. So I'll add speed and previous state dot speed plus 10. So change the speed by 10. And similarly, in accelerate, which is the break method, I'll subtract the speed by 10. Now, if I click on accelerate, then you can see that the speed is being increased. And if we apply the brake, then you can see that the speed is being decreased, right? And in both of these methods, we have used the setState method, which gives us access to the previous state, and we have returned the updated state over here, right? So that's one way to update the state. If I directly want to change the speed to a specific value, then I can choose to pass an object over here. This dot setState speed, and suppose we want to make it to 200. Then if I click on this, then you can see that the speed is directly updated based upon the value that's provided over here. So those are two different ways to update. So those are two different ways to update the state using setState method. So that was about this video. Hope you enjoyed it. In the next video, we'll talk about lifecycle methods in the React. Be sure to like the video and hit the subscribe button to get future updates about the series.